We are going to be talking about dance moms again, but we're actually going to be talking about the treatment of children in the social media sphere and basically how the show impacted their mental health and how things could be better. So, if you're interested in that, make sure to grab a snack, give this video a thumbs up, feel free to share all of your commentary in the comments below, and let's hop right into it. So, reality TV loves drama, and Dance Moms delivers it in spades. But have you ever stopped to think about what it must have been like to be one of those young girls facing extreme pressure, constant competition, and public criticism every week? Well, in this series, we are diving deep into the psychological toll that Dance Moms must have had on its young performers. With insights from psychology and mental health research, we'll explore how the high stakes environment and public scrutiny could have affected their self esteem, mental health, and sense of identity. And I'm using very loose words here. I'm saying could have, and it's very hypothetical. However, we have heard a lot of these dancers speak for themselves about how the show impacted them. And for pretty much every single member of the cast, it has been negatively. So that's not to disregard any positive that have come from being on the show and having a platform because of the show. But at the same time, pretty much every member has talked about either the show having a negative effect on them or even the moms being like, I had a negative effect on the public by being on this show and I regret a lot of things. So, anyways, that being said, we want to take a closer look at what happens when childhood is spent in the spotlight. So, let's get into it. Whether you loved the high stakes drama of Dance Moms or were left uneasy watching young kids in such intense environments, there's no denying that the show made waves. For me personally, it was kind of a mix between the two of those because I was definitely entertained by the show, but I think the part that made it so addicting to me is that it literally became like I don't know how to like a boiling pot for me to create my own very strong opinions on how children should be treated, and for me to look at my own childhood and how I see children being treated around me and how I would treat my own children. And then I went in to become a dance teacher, so for me it was how am I going to treat children within the classroom? So it definitely helped me create very strong and polarized opinions because I watched the show and I admired how Abby had this really strong conviction of what a dancer should be and how hard you need to work. But at the same time, even just seeing the little kids, I was like, okay, if Maddie can work this hard and be this on the ball at all times and she's 9 years old, then I should really be working a lot harder. But at the same time, I was seeing how an entire business was resting on this kid's shoulders. And I was like, this is not right. The way that Abby talks to people is not right. The way that this production team treats humans as a commodity is absolutely not right. And then watching kids having panic attacks and all of that, especially at a really young age, that's not okay. I was traumatized in a lot of the same ways that these kids were while I was a kid, so I definitely had some very strong, triggered, polarized emotions myself. But, anyways, what was the price of all of this? Today, we're exploring how a high pressure reality TV show like Dance Moms might impact the mental and emotional health of its young stars. Don't sue me. We'll dive into psychological research on child development and look how harsh criticism, fierce competition, and public scrutiny can influence a young person's self esteem and sense of self in general. So, first, let's talk about self esteem, especially self esteem in young children and how it's built. Most research in developmental psychology suggests that children develop self esteem through supportive environments, positive reinforcement, and encouragement. I've talked about this ad nauseum, honestly, on my channel over the years, and I mentioned it in my last Dance Moms documentary that there is so much evidentiary support that is leading towards positive criticism and not towards negative criticism, and that harsh negative criticism just creates trauma and stuff that you have to spend good money in a therapist's office getting rid of. So positive reinforcement is definitely the way to go, whether you're raising a child or you are a dance teacher, which is, in my opinion, helping raise a child. So I don't know, what is it worth to be like super harshly negative and critical on your children or your students? Is it literally helping them, or is it just selfish so that they will be obedient to you? Just a question, some little bit of food for thought. And on the other side, when we're talking about positive reinforcement, yes, you feel like you're being easy on a child by positively reinforcing them, but you don't have to be like untruthful in your positive reinforcement. You don't have to be a pushover. As a parent, as a teacher, you need to still set strong boundaries by being positive when you're enforcing a child. It is not being a pushover. Like, you can still have boundaries without being harshly negative or name calling and all of that. So let's get back into it. A child's self-worth is heavily shaped by the messages they receive from those around them. According to psychologist Carl Rogers' theory of unconditional positive regard, children need acceptance and positive reinforcement from caregivers to feel worthy and secure in themselves. But Dance Moms shows a very different environment. Rather than focusing on positive reinforcement, we see scenes where the coach Abby Lee Miller is incredibly critical. The girls often face harsh critiques, even after performances that would be considered impressive by most standards. I know I was personally impressed by so many of those performances where Abby berated the kids afterwards and told them that they were crap. Abby frequently uses what some call tough love, berating the young dancers for mistakes, calling them replaceable, or even criticizing their appearance. While she may argue that this builds resilience, psychology, on the other hand, suggests very much otherwise. Research shows that repeated negative feedback can hurt a child's self-esteem and create a sense of inadequacy. I know that that's what happened for me, especially with my parenting. Not all of my parenting, I would point this at one specific parent, but it definitely made me feel incredibly inadequate that I was never given positive reinforcement. Still this day as an adult, like, I'm never given positive reinforcement by this parent. I am never told that I am good enough, or that they are proud of me, or that I did something correctly. And yes, that has made me into somebody that works incredibly hard and somebody that, you know, is like a huge perfectionist and all of those things, but those are out of trauma, not because I was built into some strong, confident person with great self-esteem, because that does not apply. So research shows that repeated negative feedback can hurt a child's self-esteem. And did these young dancers who faced weekly criticism and a little praise develop their sense of self-worth, or did they also develop a sense of inadequacy? On top of Abby's, I don't know why I can't say Abby today. On top of Abby's critiques, these kids weren't just performing in a private dance studio, they were performing on a national stage. And that was something that I was always hyper aware of as well. And child stars are subject to public scrutiny in a way that few adults ever experience, and it can leave lasting marks on your self-image. Research from the American Psychological Association indicates that public scrutiny during formative years can lead to anxiety, self-consciousness, and even social withdrawal in later life. We've seen child stars across various forms of media struggle with this, often citing how they felt their entire identity was being judged. There's a lot to unpack there. And me personally, I had this extreme sense of inadequacy, and then I went to performing school, and I thought that I would just use this fake version of myself that I had created to navigate through life by heavy masking, that I would just use that to get through my life, and that I would be a fantastic actor because I'm so used to having to live up to people's standards, create like this facade of who I am, and live through that for my entire life. So I'm going to be a great actor. Well, acting school handed my ass to me on a silver platter. Like, basically the root of all acting, if you cannot accept yourself to the absolute most fullest degree and have the greatest, highest sense of self-awareness and know exactly who you are, you're going to be the worst actor ever. The more that somebody knows themselves, trusts who they are, and is honest with themselves, then that's the only way that you can honestly portray somebody else. Like, it just makes perfect sense. But I went to school with this great sense of inadequacy, hyper anxiety, raging panic attacks, and I had to sing every day, act every day, dance every day, and a lot of the time there would be an audience. All the time there was an audience, whether it was your peers, your teachers, or the actual performances themselves. But on top of that, they would just like spring on us, oh, it's the night for all of the people that financially support the program to come watch, and they're just going to come watch your rehearsal today. So we would have this group of people come and watch our performance, and they're paying to make this entire program possible. Like, obviously we still paid our tuition and stuff, but like, these are the donors for the college, and they would never tell us ahead of time. It was just be spring on us, and you should be fine that there's now 30 people coming in to watch your rehearsal process for something that you haven't even finished yet. So dealing through all of that trauma and all of that anxiety for me was raging. Like, I actually left college for a year and then came back because I was just having too much panic, and I was casted as Duty in Grease, which has like this giant solo section, is a heavy character in the musical, and I'd never performed anything on stage by myself ever, and they did not double cast me. So I was left to just be like, well, I'm just going to let everybody down in this entire program, and all of these people that have donated thousands of dollars, and all of my castmates and all of my teachers, if I don't go out there and do this and do it perfectly. And to push myself to that point that I actually fulfilled those obligations and did all of that by myself, that caused like the worst panic disorder in me, that I literally needed to leave college for a year. But I went back and I finished. Anyways, let's get back into it, because I had to create my entire sense of self-esteem and self-worth as an adult. Like, I had a 0 as a child, and I felt like my entire identity was being judged. And then I started becoming a YouTuber and making all of these videos and posting them online where everybody can see and anybody can chime in and give me their own opinion. And that definitely did not help things, especially in the beginning. Like, I've taken a step back from YouTube several times just to like work on myself and my own mental health. But like, let's just say that this job is not for the faint of heart or those with a thin skin. And if you don't have a thin skin and you continue, or if you don't have a thick skin and you continue to be in this business for any point of time, you're definitely going to develop a thick skin. So that is definitely what I did or continue to do at this point. But my level of being known and public recognition is nowhere near the level of all the Dance Mom stars or like their moms or anything like that. So I couldn't imagine what that level of critique does to like a 9-year-old, for example, to be open access public material to literally millions, if not billions of people. Like, that's insane. Anyways, so on Dance Moms, there were constant expectations for perfection, not just from their coach, but also from fans and critics. Public judgment on everything from their talent to their looks becomes part of the mix, often appearing in online comments or media discussions. Now imagine being a 10, 11, or 12-year-old and having strangers critique your every move on social media. Instead of building confidence, the show set these kids up to internalize their critiques, potentially harming their self-image. Now, to understand the potential impact here, let's look at other cases of child stars. Studies of former child actors, like those who worked on popular sitcoms and movies or the Disney Channel, have revealed a troubling pattern. Fame at a young age often leads to issues with self-identity, boundaries, and mental health later on. Many former child stars speak about struggling with anxiety, depression, or the pressure to live up to an image that was created for them by others. Highly relatable. In Dance Moms, we see a similar pattern. Young girls who dream of being stars are thrust into the spotlight, but under conditions that are less often ideal for their personal development. Fame brings pressure to perform and impress not just on stage, but as a character on the show. When kids grow up in an environment where they're constantly striving to meet external expectations, it can make it difficult for them to develop a solid internal sense of identity. For young kids, this is especially risky when they're still figuring out who they are. Fame can turn their self-worth into something based solely on how others view them, and that is why external validation can be a freaking trap. These pressures, criticism from coaches, judgment from the public, and the expectations that come with fame are all factors that can take a toll on a young performer's self-esteem and development. But that's just one side of the story. In part 2, we're going to take a closer look at how the intense competition and high-pressure environment might contribute to anxiety and mental health struggles in young dancers. So make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned as we get into it. This is not a separate video. We're going straight into it. But like, if you're not subscribed to my channel, what are you even doing? That's incredibly rude. So in part 1, we explored how constant criticism and public scrutiny on Dance Moms might impact a young performer's self-esteem and self-worth. But there's more to this picture. Today, we're diving into the ways high-pressure environments, like those the young dancers faced every week, can contribute to anxiety and even long-term mental health struggles. By looking at research on performance anxiety and child development, we'll break down how environments focused solely on success and perfection, top of the pyramid, like everything to win mentality, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing, and how perfection can actually do more harm than good. So first, let's talk about the psychological effects of high-pressure environments on young children. So studies show that chronic stress, especially in your formative years, can lead to heightened levels of anxiety and difficulty coping with pressure later in life. A study by the National Institute of Mental Health found that prolonged exposure to high-stress situations can affect the brain's ability to manage stress, potentially making children more prone to anxiety disorders as they grow older. Dance Moms places its young stars in a constant state of pressure, and nearly every episode we see the dancers preparing for yet another competition, and Abby frequently reminds them that only winning will secure their spot on the team. When children feel this ongoing need to meet high expectations without room for failure or support for setbacks, it creates a breeding ground for anxiety, as we saw like Maddie's extreme anxiety when she forgot her solo that one day, or all the children that ran off the stage crying, or Paige having a panic attack in rehearsal, for example. In fact, psychologists argue that a performance-driven environment with little emotional support can increase the likelihood of children experiencing chronic stress responses, which can result in persistent anxiety, aka PTSD, which I deal with on a daily basis. Super fun and fresh. Now, let's focus specifically on performance anxiety, which is common in young athletes and performers. Performance anxiety occurs when someone feels intense pressure to perform well, often to the point where it interferes with their ability to focus or enjoy the activity, aka me. Research from the American Psychological Association found that high performance environments like competitive sports or arts often amplify these feelings, especially if young people are led to believe that their value depends solely on winning or achieving. On Dance Moms, we see countless scenes where Abby's high expectations, coupled with harsh criticism, create an atmosphere that makes it nearly impossible for the girls to feel relaxed or confident. Instead, they're constantly on edge, fearing they'll lose their place on the team if they don't meet Abby's standards. Psychologists who study performance anxiety explain that this kind of pressure can damage a child's sense of joy in their art or sport, as it replaces self-motivation with a fear-based drive to meet someone else's standards. And that, in my opinion, is why nearly 99% of Abby Lee's students, whether it was on the show or otherwise, are completely burnt out by 12 years old. Sure, they're great by 12, but they're not going to have longevity in their career because they hate it so much, because it brings them so much stress and pressure that it's just an extremely negative feeling. And you want to become a professional dancer, or a dancer in general, because of your passion and excitement and how much literal dopamine that brings to your system to dance. So if you completely remove that from the system and completely remove that from the equation, it's obvious that these young kids are not going to be compelled towards dancing. If they are, it's probably from a negative point of view, or because they had incredibly strong convictions and sense of self, even as young children, that Abby wasn't able to sway them either way. But that's very rare. So studies on young athletes in high-pressure settings have shown similar trends. Those who experience constant pressure from coaches and parents often report feelings of dread around competitions, lack of enjoyment, and symptoms of anxiety. And I know that's how I feel when it comes to any performance, which is why I stopped doing live theater and live performances, because I would love to have gone to a dance competition and had that same enjoyable experience that a lot of people have had, but instead it just gives me so much stress, and the idea of competing will literally like make me want to vomit. Not just dance competitions, I've done vocal competitions, and like the stress of it made it so unenjoyable that I'm like, I literally want to die. Lovely. So in Dance Moms, it's clear that the dancers are caught in the same trap, feeling they have to win in order to be seen as worthy by their coach. So one of the most striking aspects of Dance Moms is the lack of emotional support available to the girls, especially when they're struggling. And research tells us that young people thrive when they feel they have emotional support from adults, like parents, coaches, or mentors, who show compassion, encouragement, and understanding. When children experience a stressful event, like a failure or a setback, they benefit from having someone who can help them process their emotions in a healthy way. Without this support, they're more likely to internalize negative emotions, which can lead to increased anxiety and feelings of inadequacy. But in the world of dance moms, emotional support is almost non existent. Instead, especially with cases like Eliana and her mom, she literally was berated by her own mother too. Like, at least with a lot of the other kids, they had Abby to be like this extreme hard ass in their life, but their moms were still supportive. And then you see kids like Eliana that I felt so incredibly bad for, and you could see her anxiety even as like a 7-year old, or even, yeah, I'm pretty sure she was that young when she joined the team. Maybe she was like 8 or 9. But like the amount of stress and anxiety this kid was under, and the fact that her own mother was being just as critical, if not more critical, on her, and placing all of this pressure that she needs to be the best because there's literally like no other reason to exist as a child other than to be the best dancer on the planet and win competitions and be on top of the pyramid. But she was literally worse than Abby to her kid. Anyways, so many times if a dancer doesn't perform well, Abby will tell them bluntly that they've disappointed her or that they don't deserve to be on the team. We rarely see scenes of positive reinforcement or support when a dancer needs it most, which leaves the young girls to process these negative experiences on their own, often feeling unworthy or anxious as a result, like we saw in Eliana all the time. According to the University of Illinois Department of Psychology, when children don't have a safe space to talk about their failures and fears, they can develop a negative thought pattern and heighten anxiety responses. For the young dancers on Dance Moms, the lack of support in the environment likely made it harder to deal with the ongoing pressures of the competition season. So what happens when a child is constantly in a high pressure environment without the emotional support they need? Well, over time, these experiences can lead to long-term mental health challenges and can even shape a child's outlook on themselves and the world. So we'll be exploring how the psychological stress and lack of support experienced by these young stars of Dance Moms might have lasting effects into adulthood. In parts 1 and 2, we explored how the intense environment of Dance Moms, filled with harsh criticism, constant public scrutiny, and relentless pressure, might have impacted the young dancers, don't sue me, self-esteem and mental health, but what are the long-term consequences? Well, we're going to be diving into that and how early exposure to this kind of stress in public life can shape a young person's emotional well-being into adulthood. We'll look at what former child stars have to say, the challenges they have faced, and what it takes to recover from childhood trauma in the spotlight. So let's start by talking about the long-term effects of childhood trauma. Studies show that experiencing significant stress or trauma in childhood can lead to mental health challenges in adulthood, including anxiety, depression, and self-esteem issues. Many former child stars have spoken out about these struggles, sharing how their early years in the public eye led to years of dealing with unresolved emotional issues. For example, some of the Dance Moms alumni have spoken out about their time on the show, revealing that the pressure to constantly perform and the fear of public judgment stayed with them long after the cameras stopped rolling. When you're constantly told that you're only as good as your last performance, it can lead to something called conditional self-worth. Essentially, this means they may feel valuable only when they succeed. This is breeding grounds for a narcissist, which is a fragile foundation for one's self-esteem. Experts suggest that this can lead to difficulties in personal relationships, career challenges, and an ongoing struggle with self-acceptance. Coping with the trauma of public childhood brings its own set of unique challenges. When you grow up under a constant spotlight, like the dancers on Dance Moms, there's not just internal pressure, but also external pressure to continue meeting fans' expectations and dealing with public opinions. This can make it difficult for former child stars to process their experiences in a healthy way. Research from the National Institute on Mental Health highlights that children and teens who experience intense scrutiny often feel a pressure to live up to an image that isn't really their own. We've heard Alison Stoner talk about this so many times. For the Dance Mom stars, this often means that they're caught between wanting to move on and feeling that their identity is still tied to their time on the show. Former child stars often report feeling a sense of frozenness where their identity becomes stuck in that past role. It can take true healing to heal from this, but to be pressured to perform and maintain an image that doesn't reflect who you've become is like honestly the hardest thing to break free of. But in recent years, some Dance Mom stars have opened up about their mental health journeys, with some seeking therapy to help process their experiences. Seeing this kind of transparency is a big step forward in breaking the stigma around mental health, especially for former child stars who grew up with so much pressure and so few outlets for support. And honestly, the road to recovery for former reality TV stars is far from easy, but it is possible. And mental health professionals suggest that recovery starts with redefining one's identity outside of the show and taking steps to build a more stable, supportive environment. I don't know if maybe JoJo Siwa should look into this, or I don't know. This can include therapy, building boundaries, and reconnecting with activities that bring genuine joy rather than external validation. Some former Dance Mom stars have used their fame as a platform for mental health advocacy, like Chloe, for example, speaking out about the challenges of child stardom and encouraging others to seek support. For instance, some have shared their journeys with therapy and mental health support, helping to break the stigma for both their fans and others dealing with very similar issues. Redefining their futures also means finding new creativity outlets. By stepping away from the competitive mindset instilled on dance moms, these young adults are discovering a passion for dance, or rediscovering rather, or exploring new interests on their own terms. This shift is essential in helping them separate their self-worth from the constant need to achieve, perfect, or win. And even if you stay in dance, like a lot of the Dance Moms members, especially not like the main ones, have continued to go on and dance at university at a really high level or be professional dancers, like Cameron and Macy, for example, or Brady even from season 8 or season 9? And honestly, good for them, but I'm just happy that they were able to redefine dance on their own terms and to continue things and to find that passion or refine that passion, that flame to dance again. But even if you're doing something completely different, this is so important. So what's the takeaway of this video? Dance Moms may have entertained millions, but it also serves as a cautionary tale about the high costs of child stardom. When children are placed in high-stakes, high-pressure environments without the emotional support they need, the effects can last a lifetime. No pun intended. But examining the show's impacts, we're reminded of the responsibility that comes with working with young talent, not just as parents, teachers, or producers, but as viewers too. As Dance Mom stars continue to navigate adulthood, many are finding their own paths to healing and growth. But by sharing their stories, they're helping raise awareness around mental health and the challenges of growing up on reality TV. This journey of recovery isn't a personal victory for each of them, but a step forward in the conversation around the ethics of child stardom in the entertainment industry. In the end, let's hope that the experiences of the Dance Mom stars inspire changes in how we approach child-focused reality shows. These young dancers remind us of the need for compassion, support, and understanding, both on and off screen. Thank you for watching this series, and if you found it meaningful, don't forget to subscribe. If you didn't when I reminded you earlier, then you're still rude. For more in-depth explorations of pop culture's impact on mental health and society, make sure to stick around, and as always, make sure to be weird, be wild, and stay sparkly, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!